Welcome to Chuck Builds. In this video, we're going to be installing the LEDMatrix software onto a Raspberry Pi. At this point, we're assuming you've already watched the video about how to pick a display and a hat for your Raspberry Pi. You have a micro SD card of 8 gigabytes or larger, and that you have your power supplies and a micro SD card reader ready to go to set up this project. This will be just about the software and setting up the Raspberry Pi. If you'd like to follow along, I have this all written up on my GitHub for chuckbuild/LEDMatrix. In a previous video, I had mentioned going to my blog for the latest information. Scratch that. Only use the GitHub because it's too hard to keep it up to date in different places. What we're going to do is we're going to scroll down and we're going to go to the installation steps and we're going to start preparing our Raspberry Pi. This requires us to plug in a micro SD card, 8 gigabytes or larger. I'm using 64 into a micro SD card reader and then plugging it into your computer and then running the Raspberry Pi imager. If you have the Raspberry Pi imager from my last video or from a Raspberry Pi in the past, and it does not look like my screenshots or what you're about to see in this video, make sure you get the new one. The new one solves a lot of issues when installing Trixie, the latest Raspbian OS version. If you're using the old version, you're going to have Wi-Fi issues. So we're going to launch the Raspberry Pi imager. If you don't have it, you can click this link to install it. And then we're going to choose our Raspberry Pi device. This Raspberry Pi I'm going to be using is a Raspberry Pi 3B. For the operating system, we're going to scroll down to Other and then choose Raspberry Pi OS Lite 64-bit. We're going to choose our USB reader with our micro SD card attached. Be sure you're choosing the right one. We're going to name our device. This is the Raspberry Pi. This is what you can use to log into it in your browser. Instead of an IP address, you can use this host name. You can use LEDPi. That's what I'm going to use. Choose your time zone and keyboard layout. And we need to set up a user account. This will be your root user. For the username, I am also using LEDPi, but don't get it confused with your host name. It's a different part. This is a user account, and then you'll need to choose a password. This password is important, and we're going to need it later, so make sure you choose something you're going to remember. And then we'll set up our Wi-Fi. You just choose your SSID and then enter the password and click next. We're going to make sure we have SSH enabled and that we're using password authentication. If you know how to use public key authentication, you can use that, but I'm assuming most people doing this project don't know what that is. So we're going to use our password that we set in our previous step. And then we're going to disable Raspberry Pi Connect. This is like a VPN remote access program that they're building into Raspberry Pi now. I'm going to just leave it off. I'm not using it. It shouldn't break anything, but I'm just not going to touch it. We'll click next and then review our settings and click right. And be sure that you have selected the correct SD card because once you press this, it's going to erase everything on there and you will not be able to get it back, I'm sure. So I'm going to erase and write. And this will take a few minutes, so we'll come back when it's done. And once it's finished, we'll click Finish. And then we'll put the micro SD card into our Raspberry Pi and turn it on. So the micro SD card is now in the Raspberry Pi and it is in the process of turning on. We'll give it a moment to turn on. And in the meantime, we're going to get ready to SSH or use Secure Shell to log into that Raspberry Pi. That was one of the settings that we enabled while setting up the operating system. And if you're on Windows, I recommend using PowerShell. If you're on Mac or Linux, you're going to use Terminal. And then we will type SSH, the username for me, which is LEDPi, at the host name, which was also LEDPi. If you had changed either of these, it would be SSH username at host name. And if you even wanted to, you could leave off the username and just SSH host name, and it'll prompt you for a username later. If you don't have host names on your network, like you're on a router that doesn't support a local DNS or you're using like an apartment's Wi-Fi, you can type in the IP address. If you need help finding that, you might need to connect a display to your Raspberry Pi and type IP address for it to tell you the IP address. But I'm assuming you're on a network that can do DNS, so we'll just use the host name that we set during the install. We'll press Enter. It's going to ask if we want to save the fingerprint. Click Yes. Then ask for the password. Type your password. And it's going to give us this green username at hostname with this $ for commands. So we can scroll down to the GitHub here, and we're going to use this quick install script. It should run everything in one go. We have a manual installation alternative to use the first time install script if it doesn't work. If you want to see what's in all of that, you can check out those scripts up here in our files up here, but it really just executes the commands in order to install it. So we're going to copy this We're going to open up our PowerShell, and you can either right-click paste, or you need to do Control-Shift-V. Doing just Control-V might give you some weird characters on terminal, but Control-Shift-V gets rid of all formatting, or just right-click paste also gets rid of formatting, and it'll go in correctly. And then we'll just press enter. And this is going to take a little while. It's going to tell you if there's any issues, such as you're on the wrong operating system, or if you're on the wrong device, such as a Raspberry Pi 5, or if something else fails, it'll give us a message to say that. And you can reach out to me on Discord in the Chuck Builds Discord and let me know what issues you're having. But at the time of recording, this will one-shot all the way through, restart the Pi, and the Pi should automatically start and show you the IP address for the user interface. I'm going to stop talking. So this is going to take about 10 minutes. The Pis are just not that fast, so it takes a little bit of time, but we'll be back when it's done. All right, and it finished. Took about 15, 20 minutes, not entirely sure, but went through all the process. So the Raspberry Pi, about halfway through that install, started to display the web interface and how to connect to it, but it's restarting right now. So we'll give it a moment until it pops back up, and then we'll go to the web UI. So once the Raspberry Pi restarts, you want to give it a few minutes for the first boot up for the web UI to load. It always takes a minute or so to actually initialize after a restart, but the first time will be a few minutes to install everything it needs to run. And then we'll open up a internet browser. We'll go to LEDPi:5000. It'll reroute you to v3 because that is the third version of our web UI. And we can control our display here. We can see what is currently on the screen in the live display preview. And it's a pretty realistic representation of what you're going to see on the screen as soon as it happens. My display right now is flickering a little bit, and that's because I need to update some of my display settings. So I'll go to the display tab, and I need to change my hardware mapping to Adafruit Hat PWM. And otherwise, the rest of this information is exactly correct for my device. You might need to change this based on the number of rows in your LEDMatrix, columns, and how many of them you have chained together horizontally, or how many you have chained together vertically is the parallel. Brightness, if you have a underpowered power supply and you're getting bad color, bad performance, you can drop your brightness down to save on some of that power usage. If you're using a Raspberry Pi 4 and it's set to the 3 setting, it might seem a little jittery. You want to bump that up to a 4 and it might go away. You can adjust this up or down depending on the performance of your display. And then the rest of these I have documented in the GitHub if you really care, but this is what I found to work best. The last setting that's kind of hidden on this display page is the max dynamic duration in seconds. This is a hard cap on all of the displays that use a dynamic duration. 3 minutes I thought was pretty safe, that you don't want anything on the screen for too terribly long. But if there's some reason you do want this higher, you can bump it up to as much as 30 minutes. I'm going to leave it there for now. I'm going to click save and then come over to overview. And right away after saving, my display got a little bit more stable, a little less flicker. And we're going to do just one plugin install, but for the rest of the plugins, I'm going to be doing those installs in their own videos to show you the nitty-gritty of each plugin on what you need to configure. Some are more involved than others. The plugin store is under the plugin manager tab. The first section you'll see is the installed plugins. This is what is currently installed on the display, and every display comes shipped with this web UI info so that when it turns on, you can find your IP address very quickly. Additionally, you will want to configure a GitHub token and save that token right here. This token only gives us refresh on the repositories that you can see more refreshes at a higher rate limit. The default rate limit is 60 per hour. With a token is 5,000. So if you find that the plugin store is not loading, that you're installing a lot at once, you're refreshing the page, you're going to hit that pretty quickly. It's okay. You can just wait a little while, or you can add a token here. And once you save it, it shouldn't prompt you again, but we'll go ahead and hide that and close that. And this is the plugin store. You can search here for anything in particular. And these so far are plugins that I've created. Most of these plugins are from the older version of the display. adapted to the plugin version with a few changes and mostly working. There's a lot of these, and I'm not going to lie, I have spent so much time developing and troubleshooting and testing that I don't have all of these installed all the time. Most of the time, I'm working on one at a time, getting it to work and moving on to the next. And sometimes things break. So if you find that something is not working on here, please just drop a message in the Discord or create an issue on GitHub, and I'll get to it as soon as I can. But most of these, by the time you watch this, hopefully all of them are functional, and there might be some quirks, but they're functional and you can add them to your display and get going right away. If you want to add your own repository, create your own or add one from a third party, you can add a repo, which is similar to my LEDMatrix plugins repo, where it has multiple plugins inside of that repo. So if you're a developer and you want to make 5, 10 plugins, you're more than welcome to. And then you can add that whole repo here and it'll populate the store with all of your plugins. If you're a user and you want to add just one repo from someone else that you found online, you can just paste that link to that GitHub right here and choose your branch and click install, and it should pop up right here as well. The idea is that you don't have to talk to me to make your own stuff for this. Now, you're more than welcome to reach out if you need help, but I'm using a lot of AI for this. I'd encourage you to use AI as well. But if there's a certain feature that you need added to the main branch of LEDMatrix so that this will work, let me know. I'm constantly adding things like checkboxes and drop-down menus and file upload paths, and I might need to make an adjustment for it to work for your plugin. Ideally, this encourages anyone to make any number of plugins on their own and help grow this project. If you make a plugin that you really like, you think it's ready, it's done, no issues, let me know, and I'll add a link to your repo to the LEDMatrix plugins repo, and it'll populate into the store. It's still yours. It'll still show your name. It's still your branch, and all the changes come from you. I'm just pointing people towards it, and it'll load automatically in this screen. I'm hopeful that we can grow this and make it wonderful for everybody and add every little nitty gritty plugin that's out there. It's going to take time, but I'm hopeful that we can get there. For the sake of this project though, we're going to do a simple clock. We'll click install right here. It's going to queue it and then install it, and it should pop up here in a moment. Sometimes I find I need to refresh the web page. Sometimes it seems like it pops up on its own. If you click something in the plugins and you're not sure what's happening, you think you have an error, you think it's totally unresponsive, you can come to this operation history and it'll show you what's going on. And again, sometimes you might need to click refresh. But we can see here the simple clock plugin was installed and completed. And so if we go back to our plugin manager, we'll hit refresh on the page, go back to plugin managers, and it's here. And once the clock is installed, you can enable it right here with enabled or disabled, and you can configure it right here. If you scroll down, you get a few options such as refresh, update, uninstall, or save. If you uninstall, you need to restart the entire LEDMatrix. You'd click uninstall and then go to overview and then reboot system. That's the only way to truly clear it. It will work. It's just you can't add and uninstall quickly. Back in the plugin management, you can do it on demand, which would run the display for an X amount of time. You can set it for as long as you want, or you can leave it blank until it's manually stopped. And this is a great way if you want to see just one thing for one set period of time without changing all of your settings for all of your rotations. Once you've made your changes to your plugin, you need to make sure that you always click Save Configuration. And then when you come back to the plugin manager, you can hit Restart Display or go to the overview and restart it from here. Sometimes the buttons are a little quirky. Just give it a minute. It will work. Just maybe you need a refresh or try it in a different browser. For the rest of the LED controls, you have your overview. This is like your main page where you can quickly start and stop things. General, you'll set your time zone, your location. Wi-Fi controls, still a work in progress. I wouldn't rely on this 100%, but it seems to work. Works for me. Display settings we talked about. You can restart the web service if there's been an update, or the display service if you've added a new plugin or changed any settings. If you want to update your LEDMatrix base code, which hopefully won't be too much more often, you'd click update here. And it's going to update the project and let you know when it's done. Inside of your settings, you can change the time zone here as well, change your city and state, and you need to save every time. You can schedule the display so it can run from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day, or you could just do like a an everyday schedule or a per day schedule. The config editor would allow you to make code changes to the configuration. Hopefully you don't have to use this at all. You can do it all through the plugins, and the plugins should auto-populate this config as they get their custom information. It is worth mentioning the config secrets editor. This config secrets is generic and it has spots for the YouTube, the music, and the GitHub, and like the weather API. But other plugins could add their own to this config secrets. These are just here for convenience, and these are important not to share because it gives access to your accounts. But we have placeholders there. We have a font manager to show you what all is installed and where it's installed. I hope to continue building this out to make it easier to change fonts across the display. If you have a very large display or a very small display, maybe you can change everything all at once. Work in progress, doesn't really work that well right now, but it's an idea I'm playing with. The logs tab is important to see what's going on. For some reason, my dark mode is making this look weird, but there's text in here and it tells you with timestamps what's going on and general status of your display. The cache is saving information, usually for plugins such as sports scores or gambling odds or weather. Nothing too important in here, but if for some reason you have a stale cache, you can delete it through here. Most of the bread and butter is going to be the plugin management and then the plugin management configuration files. Hopefully this is a first introduction and you have gotten to this stage of your project. The next few videos in this series are going to be installing other plugins and configuring them correctly. Let me know if you have any issues. Let me know if you have any feedback. This is a work in progress, and I'm sure this will be updated at some point in the future, but I wanted to share the newest changes to this project to make sure people felt empowered to install it and use it. I've kind of been in the middle between two versions for a while now, and I want to say officially, let's go to version 3. Let's use these plugins and feel free to share it with anybody. And this project is free. I am happy to take a donation because these AI credits are not cheap, but don't feel like you have to. I just want this to be alive and to grow. I've seen so many of these projects fizzle out and die because it's behind a paywall, and I'm hoping by keeping it as open as possible, more people get involved. Feel free to reach out. We're on Discord. Chuck builds on Discord in the LEDMatrix channel. I've got a link to that on my website and in the description on my YouTube channel. Leave a comment if this worked. Leave a comment if this didn't work. And I look forward to hearing from you. Check out the other videos if you want to add some more plugins. Thanks for watching.